My son Jake first showed his awareness of the natural world when he was only 2. He pointed at something I couldn't see in a tree and said, "Cheep, cheep," before 3 birds took flight. Our adopted dog, Toby, had runaway fever, but Jake was always able to find him in an afternoon of driving around. The fatherly sense within told me that Jake was tapping into something greater than intuition, and I wanted to test it. Jake's first hunting lesson was killing the barn rats out back. Jake didn't take to his 22 and despised the act of killing, even for fair vermin like the 5-pound rats that ate our stores. But he did it, and he was good at it. Really good. I couldn't understand it. Jake was tagging leaping, zigzagging rats with single shots, while I was lucky just to graze one. If I was able to do that at his age of 10, I would have thought I was the most deadly man. But apparently my son had more constraint and tact than I did. He bagged 32 rats in 2.5 hours. I had 4. Jake confirmed that only 3 more male rats remained, and that they would scatter to find mates. Jake was right. Jake acted as my guide when we hunted and fished together. My son led me right to the biggest buck or fish without hesitation or delay, every time. I didn't consider having Jake as a hunting guide as cheating. I considered it how God intended for us to have our little edge out here on this hard world at winning father-son hunting competitions. The hunting purses went to entry fees to bigger events and more time with my son. Truth be told, his mother hated the weeks away in the wilderness, until I set down our biggest purse to date for dragging in a 603-pound black marlin. I had to set the entire cash prize down in front of her, just so she could see what $1.3 million really looks like, before we went to the bank. A towering 7-foot monolith made of $100 bills on a wood pallet. Jake had located the black-striped marlin and won it for us on his 16th birthday. After the winnings, my wife now saw Jake's talent for what it was. A gift, honed by years of training. A gift that reached beyond the sporting world. Like the girl. We were all driving back from the grocery store when Jake made us stop the car. He knew there was someone not far from the highway who needed our help. We stopped and followed Jake to what looked like an old dry well, where we found a girl had fallen through the rotted wooden boards, sealing the opening. Jake got his photo taken with the first responders. It made the cover of 2 local newspapers under the headline, "Boy Finds and Saves Local Girl from Derelict Water Tank." But my wife still disliked all the time away from home. That couldn't be changed. But our address could. So we took the rest of the big prize and purchased a house out of state, somewhere wooded, closer to the nation's largest competitions. 127 McCain Street. 144 videos and photos showed a very nice, modern 2-story for $50,000, listed under the phrase, "divorce stress sale." The chief of police for the town owned it and vouched for its condition personally. And we packed up our things and drove for 2 days solid. 1,600 miles to home. 144 photos and 19 phone conversations aside, to buy a property sight unseen seemed dumber to my wife and I the longer we drove. Our anxiety stayed with us until we saw the home's welcoming neighborhood, immaculate exterior, and fresh, open, partially furnished rooms inside. My wife loved the gardens and views. I loved the garage and the fact that all of the foundation and guts of the house were new. My son reserved immediate judgment. He was even a little hesitant when walking into the house. As we unpacked, my son kept nervously looking around, as if he were waiting for something to come out and bite him. His paranoia came to a peak when he hung off the 2nd-story guardrail to rip out a light bulb at the center of the wall below. Jake took the bulb outside, and he smashed it in the street. I went to go have a talk with him. I told him I trusted him, with my life even, and I never once questioned him. But now, I needed to know why he smashed that bulb. Jake looked back at the house for a very long time and said,
"Dad, I don't track those animals by the little hints in the ground or by what the waters are doing. It's a sense, from an organ that's probably in my brain, like your nose, but only I have this kind of nose. The kind that sniffs out where animals, even people, are at. And I can't describe smell to someone who never had a nose. But I can smell in a different way, even in the dark, even if you cast my head in plaster. And that light bulb was alive, Dad. I sensed it like a living bird, a dog, you or me, like that girl in the water tank. That bulb was at least a piece of something living, like an eye.
I asked my son if the light bulb was still living. He looked down at the bulb's shards in the street and muttered,
"No, not like before, but..."
He didn't finish the sentence as he stared up at our new pastel-colored cookie-cutter-style townhouse. He seemed to be consumed with grim concern. At the time, my wife and I were exhausted from driving 800 miles while being on our last few $100s, and the idea of blowing that at a dirty motel for an indefinite period of time was not an option. At least, not an option that I was willing to take. I will admit that I dismissed my son's concerns as mere puberty-induced paranoia. I also dismissed the realization of how silly that reasoning was. The house was nice. It was cheap, next to some big prize tournaments, plain and simple. I'll live with sentient light bulbs. What are they gonna do? Turn off and on? Turn my house into a rave? We appreciated the fact that the house came with nice dressers, bureaus, and beds, factory plastic still on them. Fantastic sight for burnt-out travelers with a leaking air mattress. We had just enough energy to unpack the sheets to make the bed before immediately crashing. I don't remember how long I slept, but I woke up in the dark and was completely unable to move, as if the bed was the world's most powerful magnet, and I was made of pure iron. My wife was struggling meekly under the blankets. She made little sounds as if she were in pain. The worst part, I couldn't even lift an arm to knock the blanket off to see what was wrong. I would be dead if Jake hadn't been there ripping and pulling me off the bed. I fell limp in my son's arms. I didn't lack the energy. I wasn't winded. I simply did not have the bodily strength to stand. Worse yet, when I fell, my bare feet and hands that touched the floor could feel that magnetic suction again. My son, of 165 pounds, carried me, formerly 230 pounds, down the stairs as if I were his petite bride, and set me on the front lawn.
"My bed was alive too, Dad,"
Jake said as he helped stand me up on my wobbly legs.
"I never got in it. I went to your guys' room to wake you up, but you were already in."
I collapsed again and told Jake to dial 911. I was surprised to see the police chief that owned the house before us arrive with the fire department. They went up to the bedroom and found my wife's underwear in our bed, but no woman. The chief had a steadfast belief that she was simply confused and lost, and that she'll turn up any time now, while laughing off what I told him had happened with being stuck to the bed. He even laughed when I told him that I was 230 pounds and 6'5" a few hours ago. Now, I was about the same height and weighed even less than my son. He asked,
"What? You want me to believe that this house was somehow eating you? That it ate your wife? Are you insane?"
That's exactly what I wanted him to believe. And if I were not as big as I was, it would have absolutely absorbed me, like it did for my wife. Until they found her. The chief came back with my wife wrapped in one of those heavy white trauma blankets. Both of them were beaming those unflinching smiles. She said, "Silly me. I got turned around in a closet and didn't know where I was. Much better now." And the chief nodded with satisfaction. I had never heard my wife talk in such a way as that. And the woman I know would never be turned around in a closet. Jake then pulled me away from the crowd gathered around and whispered,
"I don't know what the chief or that lady claiming to be Mom are, but they are not alive."